very, very good drive again from Max Verstappen. Maximum out of the Red Bull Honda. New engines, new specs coming for Baku, which is bad news for any team that might have left Honda to go to Renault, for example. And Max just on the limit everywhere. When he was on the hard tyre and it was going away, it was no problem. He was still driving a sort of Lewis Hamilton type race there. Just superb, I thought. Again, a little bit like Lewis. It's very, very easy not to say enough about Max Verstappen's drive, because he is maturing massively this year at a time when he's obviously not in a position to win races, but he's getting the best from a difficult situation. That car isn't as good as Red Bull want it to be. I mean, for me, looking from the outside, you'd say, well, with the Honda, they're doing about as well as you could ever imagine that they would do. But I know within Red Bull, certainly Adrian Newey's brain, he's thinking that chassis is not as good as it should be right now. It's too knife edgy. They're having to work too hard to get a sweet spot out of the car. So that being the case, expect a lot more to come from there. A good drive too from Pierre Gasly, I thought, about what we should be getting from Gasly. I mean, he's no way he's going to live with Verstappen. Even 2 years down the road, he's going to be 2/10 away from Max on any given lap, in my view. As good as Pierre is, and he is good, he's very, very well-rounded professional racing driver, not professional Formula One driver. But and a good drive, and I think, to put everything into context, you'd have to say that what would Daniel Ricciardo have been thinking, really, that there's the guy in the car that he walked away from, pulling away from him at 0.3, 0.4 seconds a lap. To me, that was very sad to see. I know within the little world of Renault and Daniel, you can say, he did a good job, got the best from the car, all the rest of it. But that's not the point, is it? He left Red Bull, and he's just, it's just nowhere relative to Red Bull Honda, and that is not good enough, actually, for the factory Renault team to be that far away from Red Bull Honda is not good enough. And as for McLaren, to be that far away from the factory Renault team with the same engine, and they are McLaren, and they've got drivers like Lando and Sainz, that is certainly not good enough either. And that to me was one of the biggest disappointments of China, to see how far away McLaren were really from the factory Renaults when it came down to race day. Forget all the stuff on Friday mornings. And reliability is not there either. So for McLaren, very, very worrying times, I think, bearing in mind the quality of their driver lineup, and bearing in mind that it wouldn't have been even 5 years ago, you would have said, who's going to do the better job, the factory Renault team, duh, or McLaren? You'd say, well, no contest, McLaren, of course. But now you wouldn't even dream of thinking that McLaren are going to be up there with the factory Renault. So that was a bit of a shock, I suppose. We've seen it coming. Although I thought after Melbourne that maybe McLaren were capable of absolutely leading the midfield, but they're not. Good drive again by Alex Albon, had that shunt and recovered well from that, because it's quite easy to have a shunt like that in front of the entire pit lane and feel a bit of an idiot, and then your weekend goes away from you. But he actually got his head down and drove really well in the race. Good recovery from that shunt. As for that shunt, Alex, that was using the AstroTurf too much coming out of the last corner. But actually what it was about was too much load too soon on the right rear. And that is just a little bit of Rob Wilson required there, of just getting the car to be a little bit flatter on exit, and before to apply the power in a Kimi Raikkonen-esque way rather than to overload the right rear. Just on that point of coming out of the last corner, of course, one of the great things about Shanghai is the view of what they're doing out of there. That's probably the most interesting part of the circuit, I think, for me, is they come out of the last corner. The next corner for turn one is a right-hander. And so at some point they have to go from the right-hand side of the road to the left-hand side of the road for the right-hander. And how do they do that? Well, I've spoken enough, talked to death about how you have to do that. And this is, again, a Rob thing. You have to do that at the moment of least possible downside, because when you're moving the car under acceleration, it is taking revs out of the engine, it's putting load through the engine. So if you're going to have to move, do it as near to terminal velocity as you can do it at the last possible comfortable moment. Lewis was doing that really well. Leclerc doing it really well. I don't think he's never been to Rob, but he obviously has that innate feel. Max doing it well, but a lot of other guys still just sort of coming across as a sort of tangent through across the track and not really thinking about it, and that's disappointing to see. But full marks to Charles Leclerc there as well. What a star that guy is! Just, well, you know, I always, the minute I saw him drive, I felt that, and I just love watching him drive, watching him hang around the garage, watch him hang around the F2 paddock, whatever he's doing. Just a really good bloke. Force, whatever it is, Force Canada. Yeah, good drive from Sergio Perez. Very good drive. As I say, I think his pass around the outside of Grosjean into turn one on the first lap, very aggressive and nice to see. That was Sergio on one of his good days. And actually, though, what it really meant for me was imagine if we'd had Ocon in the other car, we at least would have been with Sergio, probably ahead of him, and we'd be thinking, wow, Force India, mega team again. But now, isn't it strange? You know, they've got more money in the team. The driver combination is less impressive than it was last year. I'm trying to be kind now. And the edge has just gone a little bit, hasn't it? It's so funny in life and racing. Just to keep that very sharp edge is very difficult. And we've seen it in Formula One so many times. More money does not necessarily equal a sharper performance. What happened again at Haas? I mean, I was there saying, well, they're going to be doing that testing after Bahrain. They should be able to get on top of why they're so slow in the races these days. Nothing seemed to have changed. It was quick in qualifying, both cars, and then just dropping like stones after 2 or 3 laps in the race. As I say, you know, last bid I did, I was saying, you know, it looks like they've just got a really stiff car and they just can't set it up for race conditions. But it can't be that simple, can it? Formula One's supposed to be much more complicated these days, and there are so many things you can do. So, again, I would suggest that that's not aerodynamic, the problem at Haas. And I think that these days it's probably quite difficult to solve mechanical, if that's the right word, Frank Doney, who says there's no such thing as mechanical grip. It is difficult to solve mechanical grip issues because there are so few things with which to play, as I understand it. So, yeah, we'll see. Final word, I think Kimi Raikkonen drove really well, Kimster. So all your billions of Chinese fans will be delighted by that. Good job, very good job. And nice to see Alfa Romeo Sauber having a pretty good race on the day that we were celebrating the 1000th Formula One event. And remembering, of course, that the first World Championship Grand Prix was staged at Silverstone in 1950 and won by Alfa Romeo. Seriously won. 1, 2, 3 finish. Should have been a 4, but Fangio didn't cross the line, had an oil problem, or leak. But yeah, on a day that was really significant for Alfa Romeo, it was nice to see Kimi. And actually, Antonio Giovinazzi drove really well too, I thought, having not really done much on Saturday when he had an issue. So, yeah, on to Baku, when we're going to see Charles really good, I think. We're going to see Lewis really good. And Max, obviously. And Ferrari wondering if Baku will be a taste for what is to come on the slower circuits, because they'll be happy to get away from those sort of medium speed corners where Mercedes still seem to be so strong. Anyway, spring is here. It's a golf course in the background, so guess what I'm going to be doing next.